The starving old alien would have died alone in that alley, if not for the human. Withered and cast out by his own people, the elderly Ledosian named Mira was just another discarded elder left to waste away, until Keith Davis found him. Keith, a grizzled human freighter pilot, couldn't walk past Mira's frail form crumpled in the shadows, not like the other Ledosians did. As the 47-year-old helped Mira up, he learned the horrible truth. Ledosian clans abandoned their elders, seeing them as useless mouths to feed in a culture that prized strength. They were the Kirshal, those without purpose, left to fend for themselves. Supporting Mira's bony body, Keith got the old alien some rations and made some inquiries around the spaceport. What he discovered painted a grim picture. Ledos's elders, once respected for their wisdom, were now an epidemic of neglect and indifference. Advanced alien technology had made their people scorn ancestral knowledge as primitive. Now their elderly died alone, forgotten, with no one to pass their insights to. It reminded Keith of a dark chapter in Earth's own history, centuries ago, when the aged were also cast aside. But humanity had evolved past such callousness. He saw now that while the Ledosians had advanced far in technology, they had regressed in compassion. Someone had to remind them of the value in their elders' experience. Keith resolved to be that someone. "I've got an idea," he told Mira. "I'll make your people see purpose in their Kirshal again, even if I have to knock sense into every last clan leader myself." The old Ledosian looked at him in disbelief. No outsider had ever cared about their plight. But behind Keith's stubborn stare, Mira saw a rare human unwilling to accept such cruelty. Keith's decision that fateful day would soon draw them both into a bitter cultural war on Ledos, between traditionalists clinging to a harsh dogma and reformists fighting to restore the dignity of age. To change an entire planet's mindset, Keith would need every ounce of human determination and cunning to sway the proud clans. With time running out for Ledos's forgotten elders, Keith and Mira begin a seemingly impossible mission to make a world in the stars value wisdom over strength once again, and perhaps find renewed purpose themselves along the way. Keith watches intently as a dozen Kirshal elders shuffle onto his freighter, the Triton. Determined eyes peer out from wrinkled faces, their frail bodies supported by walking sticks, and the occasional younger relative who has broken from tradition to aid them. Mira stands at the base of the ramp, greeting each elder by name, a beacon of reassurance. As the last straggler boards, Keith joins Mira, placing a steady hand on the old Ledosian's shoulder. "Are you sure they're up for this? It won't be an easy ride, physically or emotionally." Mira meets his gaze, a fire burning in those aged eyes that Keith has come to admire. "They are ready, Keith Davis. You have given them something they thought lost forever. Purpose. They will endure." Keith nods, throat tightening with emotion. He has never been one for sentiment, but the courage of these discarded elders moves him in a way he hasn't felt in years. The crew makes the Kirshal as comfortable as possible in the converted cargo bay, distributing blankets and cushions with a gentleness that speaks to their shared conviction in the cause. Joran is there, moving among the elders, shaking hands and exchanging solemn words of encouragement. As the Triton lifts off, Keith settles into the pilot's chair, his co-pilot and engineer Rav at his side. The young man has been with Keith for years, a friendship forged in the trenches of space hauling. "Never thought we'd be running a revolution instead of freight," Rav muses, flipping switches and monitoring their ascent. Keith snorts. "You kidding? This is exactly the kind of bleeding heart crusade you live for." Rav grins, unashamed. "Guilty as charged. But seems to me you're the one leading this particular crusade, boss." In the belly of the ship, the Kirshal whisper prayers and stories to one another, voices rasping with age. Young aides move among them, serving tea and tending to their needs, an unprecedented sight in a society that has long abandoned its elderly. Joran circulates, listening to their tales, recording their wisdom on his datapad. These are the stories the Ledosian people have forgotten, the hard-earned knowledge they have allowed to wither. The weight of his people's folly sits heavy on Joran's shoulders. The journey to the capital is tense, the Triton's crew and passengers acutely aware of the potential for disaster. Keith keeps them on a circuitous route, avoiding major flight lanes where they might be intercepted. The clans cannot learn of their plan prematurely. In stolen moments, Keith finds himself sitting with the Kirshal, absorbing their histories, their insights. He marvels at the depth of their understanding, the richness of their experiences. The waste of it all, the sheer wrongness of their abandonment, hardens his purpose. As they approach the capital, Keith gathers the crew and the Kirshal representatives in the common room. The air is thick with anticipation, fear, and a defiant hope. "No matter what happens today," Keith begins, looking each being in the eye, "know that what you're doing matters. You're reclaiming your place in the world, your right to dignity. And we're with you, every step of the way." Mira translates for the elders, his voice ringing with conviction. Nods of affirmation, murmurs of gratitude, a sense of solidarity in the face of an uncertain future. The Triton touches down on the outskirts of the capital, and the Kirshal begin their slow, determined march towards the council chambers, Keith, Joran, and the others flanking them like an honor guard. The sight of the elders, resplendent in traditional robes, walking with purpose, draws startled looks from passers-by. The commotion grows as they near the heart of power, whispers racing through the streets. The Kirshal, the forgotten ones, daring to show their faces, to demand recognition. It is a scene none had thought to witness in their lifetimes. At the grand gates of the council chamber, they are met by a wall of guards, weapons at the ready. The imposing Orthodox clan leaders glare down from the balcony, their shock quickly giving way to outrage. "What is the meaning of this?" the High Counselor demands, his voice booming across the square. "How dare these Kirshal trespass here?" Keith steps forward, voice steady, carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. "They dare, Counselor, because they have been silent too long, because Lados has lost its way, and it's time to remember what truly matters." And for the first time in generations, the seeds of change take root in the hearts of the Ladosian people. The Triton and Toron's sleek vessel descended towards the council citadel's landing pad, thrusters kicking up swirls of dust. Keith's hands danced over the controls, easing the freighter down with practiced precision. As the landing gear touched down with a soft thunk, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He strode to the cargo hold, where the Kirshal elders huddled together, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and purpose. Mira stood at the front, his gnarled hand gripping a walking stick. "Are you ready?" Keith asked, meeting each elder's gaze in turn. Mira nodded, his voice cracking with emotion. "We have waited lifetimes for this moment, Keith Davis. We are ready." The cargo bay door hissed open, revealing the imposing edifice of the council chambers. A small group of startled Ladosian officials stood frozen on the landing pad, clearly unprepared for their arrival. Toron Kell strode confidently down his ship's ramp, his ornate clan robes billowing in the wind. "Greetings, councillors," he called out, his young voice carrying an authority beyond his years. "I present to you the forgotten wisdom of our people." Keith and Barclay flanked the elders as they slowly made their way down the Triton's ramp. The officials' expressions ranged from shock to outrage to grudging curiosity. "What is the meaning of this?" A portly councillor in elaborate robes sputtered, "How dare you bring these Kirshal to the sacred chambers?" Toron's eyes flashed. "I dare because it is long past time we remembered the value of age and experience, Councillor Vex. These elders have knowledge that could save our people from stagnation." Vex's face purpled with rage. "This is an outrage. Guards, remove these trespassers at once." A dozen armed Ladosian guards moved to surround the group. Keith's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but Mira placed a calming hand on his arm. "No violence," the old Ladosian wheezed. "We are here to teach, not to fight." Before anyone could make another move, a booming voice echoed across the landing pad. "Enough!" All heads turned to see an ancient Ladosian emerge from the council chambers, leaning heavily on an intricately carved staff. His robes marked him as the High Elder, a largely ceremonial position Keith had learned about from Joran. The High Elder's rheumy eyes scanned the assembled group, lingering on the Hirschal. "I will hear what these elders have to say," he declared, his voice wavering but firm. "Bring them to the Great Hall." Councillor Vex opened his mouth to protest, but a withering glare from the High Elder silenced him. The guards parted, creating a path for the Kirschal to enter the citadel. As they made their way inside, Keith couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. They had made it this far against all challenges. Now it was up to the wisdom of the Kirschal to remind the Ledosian people of what they had nearly lost. The great doors of the council chamber loomed before them, ornately carved with the history of the Ledosian people. Keith exchanged a look with Toron, both acutely aware of the weight of the moment. Whatever happened next would shape the future of an entire civilization. With a deep breath, Keith stepped forward and pushed open the doors, revealing the assembled council in all its ancient splendor. The time for revolution had come. The cacophony of enraged roars hit Keith like a physical force as he stepped into the council chamber. The circular room towered above them, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. Dozens of Ledosian clan leaders glared down from their elevated seats, their scaled hides dripping with anger. "Herr Kell," bellowed a particularly massive Ledosian, his voice cutting through the din. "You dare bring these outsiders and those things into our sacred chambers?" Toron strode forward, his posture radiating authority despite his youth. "I dare, Councillor Vex, because our people teeter on the brink of stagnation. We have forgotten the value of wisdom in our pursuit of strength." Keith watched as Toron's words sent fresh ripples of outrage through the assembly. The young heir stood unflinching as insults and threats rained down upon him. The Kirschal huddled close behind Keith and Barclay, their frail bodies trembling. Mira's gnarled hand gripped Keith's arm tightly. "Perhaps this was a mistake," the old Ledosian whispered, his voice quavering. Keith set his jaw, eyes scanning the hostile faces above. "No turning back now, Mira, we've come too far." A thunderous boom silenced the chamber as the High Elder slammed his staff against the floor. The ancient Ledosian's rheumy eyes swept over the assembly, lingering on Keith and the Kirschal. "Herr Kell," he wheezed, his voice carrying surprising strength. "Explain yourself." Toron bowed deeply. "High Elder, I bring before you the forgotten wisdom of our people. These Kirschal have knowledge that could guide us through the challenges we face. I ask only that you hear them out." The High Elder considered this for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The chamber held its breath, the tension palpable. "Very well," he finally proclaimed. "Let the outsiders and the Kirschal speak. We shall judge the worth of their words." A fresh wave of protests erupted, but the High Elder silenced them with a raised hand. He gestured for Keith and the others to approach the central hollow pedestal. Keith's heart pounded as he led the group forward. The eyes of every Ledosian clan leader bored into them, filled with suspicion and barely contained hostility. He could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them all. As they reached the pedestal, Toron leaned in close. "Remember, human," he murmured, "on my terms. Do not test the limits of my protection." Keith nodded grimly. He turned to face the assembly, acutely aware that the fate of the Kirschal, and perhaps the future of Ledosian society itself, now rested on what happened next. Keith's mind reeled as he stared up at the writhing cosmic monstrosity that had once been Orkandarav. The chamber, moments ago filled with the cacophony of outraged voices, now echoed with the eerie silence of stunned disbelief. Toron's limp form dangled from one of Orkan's ethereal tendrils, his crimson aura flickering weakly. The young heir's defiant charge had been for naught against the overwhelming might of the Alketh's true form. "Mira!" Keith whispered hoarsely, his eyes never leaving the pulsating horror before them. "You and the other Kirschal need to get out of here, now." The ancient Ledosian's wrinkled hand gripped Keith's arm with surprising strength. "No, human. We will not abandon our people in their hour of greatest need." Before Keith could argue further, Orkan's slithering voice filled the chamber once more, seeming to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. Behold the futility of your resistance, the entity gurgled, its form rippling with malevolent glee. Your pitiful traditions, your hollow ideals, all meaningless in the face of cosmic truth. Keith's gaze darted frantically around the chamber. The clan leaders cowered in their seats, many openly weeping or frozen in catatonic terror. The guards who had so eagerly threatened violence mere moments ago now huddled together like frightened children. Only the Kirshal stood tall, their weathered faces set with relentless drive. Mira stepped forward, his voice quavering but resolute. "You are not our destiny, abomination," the elder proclaimed. "You are a perversion of all that makes us Ledosian." A booming laugh shook the very foundations of the citadel. "Foolish relic," Orkan sneered. "Your kind are nothing but the discarded husks from which we have emerged. Watch now as I strip away the last vestiges of your pathetic existence." The writhing mass of tentacles surged forward, engulfing Mira and the other elders in a cocoon of searing crimson energy. Their agonized screams tore through Keith's soul, galvanizing him into action. "No!" Keith roared, drawing his sidearm in one fluid motion. He knew the gesture was likely futile against such power, but he couldn't stand idly by. The pistol's retort was swallowed by the otherworldly din as he emptied the clip into Orkan's undulating form. To Keith's shock, the entity recoiled, releasing the Kirshal from its grasp. The elders collapsed to the floor, gasping and trembling, but alive. "Impossible," Orkan's voice thundered, a note of genuine surprise coloring its eldritch tones. Keith's mind raced, piecing together the implications of what had just occurred. Somehow his simple human weapon had affected this cosmic being when Toron's spiritual assault had failed. A wild, desperate plan began to form. "Barclay!" Keith shouted, turning to his still kneeling companion. "Snap out of it, man! I need you!" The burly mechanic's eyes slowly focused, sanity creeping back into his gaze. "Keith, what the hell is happening?" "No time to explain," Keith said, hauling Barclay to his feet. "I need you to get to the Triton, grab every weapon we've got on board, and bring them here, now." Barclay nodded, his training kicking in despite the madness surrounding them. He sprinted towards the chamber's exit, shoving past paralyzed guards and weeping clan leaders. Keith turned back to face Orkan, his heart pounding but his grit firm. He stepped in front of the Kirshal, shielding them with his body. "Oh, you want them?" Keith snarled, staring up at the cosmic abomination. "You'll have to go through me first." Orkan's form pulsated with rage, tendrils lashing out in all directions. "So be it, insignificant speck. Your defiance will make your inevitable annihilation all the sweeter." As the entity's full fury bore down upon him, Keith steeled himself for the fight of his life. He knew the odds were insurmountable, but he would not yield. For the sake of the Ledosians, for the very soul of this world, he would stand his ground. Keith's laughter quickly turned into a pained groan as he attempted to sit up. His body felt like it had been run through a meat grinder, every nerve ending screaming in protest. Mira's gnarled hand gently pressed against his chest, urging him to stay still. Keith's eyes darted around the decimated council chamber, taking in the full scope of the destruction. Shattered pillars and smoldering debris littered the floor, while eerie wisps of residual energy danced in the air like ghostly fireflies. The acrid stench of ozone and something far more alien permeated the air. "Toron," Keith croaked, his throat raw. "Is he—" Mira nodded, gesturing towards a huddled group of Ledosian guards near the chamber's ruined entrance. "The young heir lives, thanks to your actions, though I fear the scars of this encounter may run deeper than flesh." Keith's gaze settled on Toron's prone form, relief washing over him as he saw the rise and fall of the Ledosian's chest. Barclay stumbled into view, his face ashen and streaked with soot, but mercifully alive. Before Keith could formulate a response, a low rumble shook the chamber. Hairline fractures spiderwebbed across the walls and ceiling, ominous creaks echoing through the air. "The Citadel's structural integrity has been compromised," one of the other Kirshal elders announced, his voice tinged with urgency. "We must evacuate immediately." Keith gritted his teeth, forcing his battered body into motion. Mira and Barclay helped him to his feet, each step sending fresh waves of agony through his frame. As they made their way towards the exit, Keith's gaze fell upon the smouldering crater where the Akathoken had manifested. A faint, otherworldly shimmer still lingered in the air above the impact site. For a heart-stopping moment, Keith feared the cosmic horror might rematerialize, but the distortion faded, leaving behind only the acrid stench of interdimensional displacement. Mira's ancient eyes met his, filled with a mixture of relief and profound weariness. For now, yes, but the eternal becoming is not so easily thwarted. We have won a great victory this day, but the war is not nearly finished. As they stumbled out of the crumbling council chambers and into the chaos-filled corridors beyond, Keith couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the opening salvo in a conflict beyond mortal comprehension. The weight of cosmic responsibility settled heavily upon his shoulders, a burden he never asked for but could no longer ignore. The ragtag group of survivors pressed on, leaving behind the shattered remnants of Ledosian tradition and the echoes of an eldritch nightmare. Whatever came next, Keith knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Keith's muscles screamed in protest as Toron helped him to his feet. The human's battered body swayed, threatening to collapse, but the Ledosian air's firm grip steadied him. Around them the chamber buzzed with renewed energy, scales glinting in the flickering emergency lights as warriors clasped forearms and elders nodded in solemn approval. "Easy there, big guy," Keith grunted, patting Toron's armored chest. "I might have faced down cosmic horrors, but I'm still just a squishy human underneath it all." Toron's mandibles clicked in what Keith assumed was the Ledosian equivalent of a chuckle. "Your frailty belies your strength, Keith of Earth. Come, let us see to your wounds." As they limped towards a makeshift triage area, Mira fell into step beside them. The elder's wrinkled face beamed with pride, his azure aura pulsing gently. "I never thought I'd live to see this day," Mira croaked, his gnarled hand resting on Keith's shoulder. "Our people united once more in purpose and spirit." Keith winced as a medic began applying a viscous, tingling salve to his lacerations. "Don't get me wrong. I'm glad we averted galactic annihilation and all, but I distinctly remember something about a meal being promised." Mira's eyes crinkled with mirth. "Ah yes, the famous human appetite. Fear not, my friend. Once we've tended to the wounded and secured the citadel, there will be a feast unlike any you've ever seen." Toron, who had been conferring with his guards, turned back to the group. "I've ordered our kitchens to prepare a banquet befitting heroes," he declared. "But first we must address the council. Our people need to understand what has transpired here today." Keith raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's wise? Last I checked, most of those old-timers weren't exactly thrilled with the whole cosmic revelation thing." Toron's eyes gleamed with newfound purpose. "They will listen now. The scales have fallen from our eyes, Keith. It's time we faced our true heritage, no matter how uncomfortable the truth may be." As if on cue, a group of battered but determined-looking clan leaders approached. Their ornate robes were torn and scorched, but their bearing spoke of rekindled commitment. "Heir Toron," the lead counselor rumbled, bowing his head, We were wrong to doubt you. The wisdom of the Kirshal, the courage of this human, they have shown us the error of our ways." Toron clasped the counselor's forearm in a warrior's grip. "There is no shame in admitting our faults, honored elder. What matters now is how we move forward." Keith watched the exchange with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, leaving him lightheaded and more than a little overwhelmed. "Not to interrupt this touching moment of cultural rebirth," he quipped, fighting to keep his eyes open, "but I think I might need to sit down for a bit." Mira chuckled, guiding Keith to a nearby chunk of fallen masonry. "Rest, my friend, you've earned it. When you awaken, we'll show you Ledosian hospitality like you've never imagined." As Keith's consciousness began to fade, lulled by the soothing hum of alien voices and the gentle application of medicinal salves, he couldn't help but grin. Maybe saving the galaxy wasn't such a bad gig after all, especially if it came with a free meal at the end of it. Keith stumbled forward, his legs feeling like lead as he struggled to keep pace with Taran and the Kirshal elders. The abyssal expanse stretched endlessly before them, a kaleidoscope of swirling energies and fractured realities that threatened to overwhelm his senses. "Easy there, big guy," Taran murmured, his scaled hand steadying Keith's shoulder. "The first traverse is always the most disorienting." As they pressed onward, the formless chaos around them began to coalesce into more recognizable shapes. Ghostly echoes of ancient Ledosian cities shimmered into existence, their towering spires and sweeping archways impossibly intricate and alien. Keith watched in awe as entire civilizations rose and fell in the span of heartbeats, millennia of history compressed into fleeting moments. "The Ancestral Archive is not merely a repository of knowledge," Mira explained, his wizened voice cutting through the psychic cacophony. "It is a living record of our people's journey through time and space." Suddenly, the spectral landscape shifted violently. Keith found himself standing amidst a raging battle, ethereal warriors locked in combat with monstrous entities that defied description. The clash of otherworldly weapons and the screams of the fallen reverberated through his very soul. "The first incursion," Taran intoned gravely, "when the Acathracan first breached the veil between realities." Before Keith could process the horror unfolding before him, the scene dissolved once more. Now they stood in a vast chamber, surrounded by robed figures channeling streams of pure cosmic energy. At the center of it all, a pulsing nexus of power that seemed to bend the fabric of reality itself. Keith's head spun as revelation after revelation crashed over him. He witnessed the rise of the clan system, the gradual corruption of the old ways, and the slow decay of Ledosian society. Through it all, a familiar undercurrent pulsed, the same eldritch energy he had faced in the council chambers. "It was always there," Keith breathed, the pieces finally clicking into place. "The Acathracan never truly left, did it?" Taran's eyes met his, filled with grim understanding. "No, Warder, it has been waiting, biding its time, seeping into the very foundations of our civilization." As if summoned by those words, the swirling energies around them began to coalesce once more. This time, however, there was a palpable sense of menace in the air. Keith's muscles tensed, every instinct screaming danger. "We near the inner sanctum," Mira warned, his ancient frame trembling with exertion. "Steel yourselves, for what lies ahead will test the very limits of our tenacity." The formless void parted like a curtain, revealing a sight that stole the breath from Keith's lungs. Before them loomed a structure that defied comprehension, a vast, multi-dimensional lattice of pure energy, pulsing with the heartbeat of creation itself. "The Nexus," Taran breathed, awe and terror mingling in his voice. "The very crucible of Ledosian spirituality, and the linchpin of the Acathracan's corruption." As they approached the towering edifice, Keith felt a familiar presence stirring within him. The eldritch flame that had marked him as Skritok flared to life, suffusing his being with otherworldly power. With a shared nod of purpose, the unlikely band of cosmic pilgrims stepped forward, ready to face whatever trials awaited them in the heart of Ledosian existence. Keith's knees buckled as reality solidified around him. The cosmic vastness of the Akath-Kihri archives condensed into the ziggurat's central sanctuary, leaving him gasping for breath. His fingers dug into the smooth surface of the circular dais, desperately seeking purchase as his mind reeled from the metaphysical onslaught. Beside him, Taran stumbled, his scaled hand reaching out to steady himself against Keith's shoulder. The Ledosian heir's eyes were wide, pupils dilated as he struggled to process the incomprehensible truths they had witnessed. "By the first ones," Taran whispered, his voice hoarse. "I never imagined, never dreamed." Mira, the ancient Kirshal elder, seemed less affected by their cosmic journey. His wizened face was etched with a mix of awe and solemn understanding as he gazed up at the pulsing holographic effigy of the Yavrena catalyst. Keith forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly as he took in the alien grandeur of their surroundings. The obsidian walls seemed to ripple with barely contained potential. while arcane symbols etched into every surface pulsed with an otherworldly light. Each glyph burned itself into Keith's retinas, carrying fragments of meaning too vast for his mortal mind to fully comprehend. What just happened?" Keith managed to croak out, his throat raw as if he'd been screaming for hours. Before anyone could answer, the air before them shimmered. The holographic representation of the Yavrenna catalyst coalesced into a more defined form, a being of pure energy, its features constantly shifting between humanoid and utterly alien geometries. When it spoke, the words reverberated through their very atoms. "You have been judged and found worthy mortal inheritors. The infinite continuum acknowledges your right to bear witness." Keith felt a surge of pride mingled with terror. He had faced down the very essence of creation itself and emerged, changed, but intact. The primal scar that had allowed him to wound the Akatharkan now pulsed in harmony with the cosmic energies swirling around them. Toron stepped forward, his regal bearing reasserting itself as he addressed the Avatar. "Great Yavrenna, we come seeking wisdom to save our people from the corruption that threatens to consume us. What must we do?" The holographic entity's form rippled, fragments of countless Ledosian ancestors flickering across its surface. When it responded, Keith felt the weight of eons behind each word. "The path forward lies in reconciliation of past and future. You must reforge the broken links in your spiritual chain, embracing both the wisdom of your forebears and the potential of those yet unborn." Mira nodded solemnly, his ancient eyes gleaming with newfound purpose. "We have strayed far from our true heritage. The time has come to reclaim what was lost." As the group stood transfixed by the Avatar's pronouncement, Keith felt a subtle shift in the energy surrounding them. The runes etched into the chamber's surfaces began to pulse more rapidly, their light intensifying with each passing moment. "Sir, guys," Keith called out, a note of urgency creeping into his voice. "I think something's happening." The obsidian walls of the sanctuary began to fracture, hairline cracks spreading across their seamless surface. Through these fissures, Keith caught glimpses of other realms, echoes of past and future Ledosian civilizations, each one a potential path their species might follow. The Yavrenna's avatar expanded, its form filling the chamber as it addressed them one final time. "The veil between realities grows thin. You must act swiftly to seal the breach and prevent the Akatharkan's final incursion. Go forth, truth-bearers, and reclaim your destiny." With those words, the sanctuary erupted into a maelstrom of light and sound. Keith felt himself being pulled in 1,000 directions at once, his very essence threatening to unravel as the boundaries between dimensions collapsed around them. Through the chaos he reached out, grasping Toron's hand with one of his own and Mira's with the other. The physical contact anchored him, a lifeline amidst the swirling cosmic tide. "Hold on!" Keith shouted, his voice barely audible above the dimensional cacophony. "Whatever happens, we face it together." As one, the unlikely band of cosmic pilgrims braced themselves against the surging energies, ready to be hurled into whatever reality awaited them on the other side of this metaphysical storm. The cosmic vortex spat them out into a realm of utter wrongness. Keith's newly augmented senses reeled as he tried to process the warped reality around him. The very fabric of space-time seemed to writhe and twist, its fundamental laws perverted beyond recognition. Beside him, Toron's war avatar thrummed with pent-up energy. By the first ones, he sub-vocalized, his voice a mix of awe and revulsion. "What have they done to this place?" Keith's gaze swept across the landscape, if it could even be called that. Shattered fragments of civilizations hung suspended in a void of swirling entropic energies. Ghostly echoes of Ledosian cities phased in and out of existence, their once majestic spires now warped into grotesque parodies of themselves. Mira's transcendent form pulsed with ancestral wisdom. "This is the result of unchecked spiritual decay," he intoned, his words resonating across multiple planes of existence. "A civilization that abandoned its roots, spiraling into madness and self-destruction." As if in response to their presence, the corrupted realm began to coalesce. Tendrils of malignant energy snaked towards them, probing and searching. Keith felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness as the very essence of this place tried to infiltrate his newly reconfigured being. "Stay focused," he broadcast to his companions, channeling his indomitable human will through his augmented form. "Remember why we're here." Suddenly, a discordant screech tore through the multidimensional ether. Before them materialized a nightmarish amalgamation of flesh and machine, a twisted mockery of Ledosian form. Its eyes blazed with unholy fire as it regarded the truth-bearers. "Interlopers," it hissed, its voice a cacophony of corrupted harmonics. "You dare trespass in our perfected realm?" Keith felt Toron's battle rage surge through their linked consciousness. The Ledosian Air's war avatar bristled with crackling energy, itching for confrontation, but before any of them could act, the Yavrenna's tone resonated once more. "Hold fast, truth-bearers. Your task is not mere destruction, but cosmic recalibration. You must excise the rot without obliterating the potential for renewal." Keith's mind raced, processing eons of compressed wisdom in microseconds. He understood now they weren't here simply to annihilate, but to heal, to cauterize the wound in reality itself, and set this fractured timeline back on its proper course. With newfound purpose, Keith reached out with his augmented consciousness. He could sense the others doing the same. Toron, Mira, the Elders, all extending tendrils of pure, uncorrupted animus energy into the festering wound of space-time. The corrupted entity before them howled in fury and fear, as waves of ancestral truth began to wash over it. Keith pushed harder, forcing himself to remember every scrap of humanity that defined him, every triumph, every failure, every moment of growth and understanding. He felt the others doing the same, Ledosian wisdom and human perseverance intertwining into a force of cosmic renewal. The very fabric of reality around them began to shift and realign, purged by the cleansing fire of uncompromising truth. "No," the corrupted being shrieked, its form beginning to unravel. "We are perfection, we are the true path." And as they worked, he caught glimpses of possibility. A renewed Ledosian civilization rising from the ashes, one that honored its past while embracing its future. A culture that could stand as a bulwark against the encroaching darkness of the universe. The work was nowhere near the end, but in that moment, Keith knew with absolute certainty that they would succeed, because in the face of cosmic truth, even the most entrenched lies could not stand. Keith's transcendent war vector coalesced at the edge of the ravaged realm, his cosmic truth force matrices humming with power. The entropic wasteland before him pulsed with sickly energies, a festering wound in the fabric of reality. Toron's voice crackled through the virtual channels, his warmind's analysis grim. Catastrophic breakdown detected, space-time integrity compromised beyond standard parameters. Keith focused his enhanced senses on the realm's core, peering through layers of corruption. What he saw made his essence recoil. Civilizations that might have been writhed in eternal agony, their potential forever stillborn. "This goes beyond neglect," Keith transmitted, his voice tight. "It's willful destruction." As if triggered by his words, the singularity at the realm's heart convulsed. Shards of broken time lashed out, razor-sharp. Keith's warform shuddered as the assault battered his defenses. "Containment fields to maximum," he roared, reinforcing his form with conceptual armor. "Lock down those chronological vectors." The truth-bearers responded as one, their combined might warping gravitational forces to create a protective sphere. Iridescent energy crackled around them, barely holding back the tide of corruption. Toron's tactical updates flowed constantly, animus integrity at 95% and dropping. Keith knew they were out of options. The singularity's hunger grew with each moment, threatening to devour them all. He made his decision. "All vectors concentrate on me," he commanded, channeling vast energies into his form. "We're collapsing this realm at the source." Shocked silence met his words. Even Toron hesitated, the gravity of such an action clear to all. To unmake an entire reality was the most extreme measure conceivable. Yet as Keith gazed upon the roiling anathema before them, he knew there was no other choice. This cosmic tumor had to be excised. With that, he unleashed his attack. A lance of pure existential potential stabbed into the heart of the corrupted singularity. Reality itself screamed in protest as Keith's truth seed burrowed deeper, collapsing the tainted realm along every axis of its being. The truth-bearers held firm as creation unraveled around them. Keith felt his consciousness stretched to its limits, staring into the face of oblivion itself as his attack reached its climax. When the cosmic dust settled, they found themselves gazing upon a new horizon. Where once festered a cancerous realm, now hovered a tiny mote of purified potential, the distilled essence of an entire reality, reborn. Keith felt the Yavrenna's approval resonate through his being as fresh animus flows began to spread from that singular point. New realities blossomed, untainted by the corruption they had purged. As he watched this cosmic rebirth, Keith knew their work was just the beginning. But in that moment, as he stood with his transcendent brethren, the weight of their responsibility felt like a sacred calling. The fire of renewed purpose blazed in the eyes of the truth-bearers. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together, guardians of the infinite continuum's sanctity. The cosmic revelations rippled through Keith's augmented consciousness, each wave of truth more profound than the last. His biomechanical form thrummed with an energy beyond mere physical sensation, a resonance that connected him to the very fabric of Ledosian existence. Toron's voice cut through the metaphysical cacophony. The cradle's defenses are adapting. We must act swiftly. Keith refocused, his gaze sweeping across the shimmering neo-manifold before them. Countless fractals of potential timelines bloomed and withered in nanoseconds, a dizzying array of what-ifs and might-have-beens. There, Mira's wizened hand stabbed forward, indicating a pulsing nexus of golden light. The primary resonance node. If we can synchronize our truth matrices with its frequency. Without hesitation, Keith plunged his consciousness into the swirling vortex of ancestral wisdom. The others followed, their essences intertwining with his in a symphony of shared purpose. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Keith felt his very being unravel and reconstitute 1,000 times per heartbeat, each iteration infused with deeper understanding of the Ledosian spiritual continuum. Toron's warmind provided tactical clarity amidst the tempest of revelation. The Akath-Kiri resonance stream, I can see its flow now. It's beautiful. Indeed, coursing through the heart of the Kethrala matrix was a river of pure conceptual energy. This was the lifeblood of Ledosian culture, carrying the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. Now, Keith called out, marshalling every ounce of his truth-bearer conviction, let's open the floodgates. As one, they poured their combined will into the resonance stream. Keith felt the resistance of ages-old safeguards and filters put in place to protect the purity of the ancestral teachings. But those protections had become a prison, isolating the Ledosians from vital truths. With a sound beyond hearing, beyond comprehension, the barriers shattered. The Kethrala matrix erupted in a supernova of enlightenment. Every facet of the crystalline structure blazed with newfound radiance, refracting and amplifying the ancestral wisdom a millionfold. Keith witnessed entire epochs of Ledosian history rewrite themselves in an instant, not changing the past but illuminating it with long-forgotten context and nuance. He saw mighty empires rise and fall, their triumphs and follies serving as object lessons for future generations. Most crucially, he observed the rekindling of a deep, abiding reverence for the accumulated wisdom of the elders. The folly of discarding the past became glaringly apparent, replaced by a culture that cherished its roots even as it reached for the stars. "It's working," Mira exclaimed, his ancient eyes glittering with tears of joy. "The truth is spreading across the entire continuum." Keith nodded, feeling the ripples of change propagating outward at translight speeds. Every Ledosian, from the lowliest laborer to the mightiest potentate, was being touched by this wave of spiritual awakening. But their work was far from finished. As the initial surge of revelation began to subside, Keith sensed new challenges looming on the cosmic horizon. The reawakened Ledosian civilization would face trials that would test their newfound spiritual strength. "We've lit the flame," Taron said, his war form crackling with renewed purpose. "Now we must ensure it never goes out." Keith nodded, his truth-bearer matrices already recalibrating for the long vigil ahead. The Kethrala sanctum pulsed around them, a beacon of hope and enlightenment in a universe still fraught with darkness and ignorance. "Together," Keith said, reaching out to clasp hands with his unlikely band of cosmic pilgrims. "For as long as it takes." And with that vow they set forth into the infinite expanse of time and space, guardians of a truth that would echo across the ages. The resonance bloom exploded outward, a nova of pure human defiance. Keith's consciousness rode the shockwave, his very essence rewriting reality in its wake. The fabric of space-time buckled and warped, unable to contain the raw power of humanity's indomitable spirit. Taron's voice cut through the chaos, a lifeline of familiarity in the maelstrom. "Keith, what have you done?" But Keith could barely hear him. His senses, expanded beyond mortal comprehension, took in the totality of creation as it trembled before the onslaught of human will. Civilizations rose and fell in the blink of an eye, entire galaxies reshaped by the force of his rebellion. The ancient Warden Mind's presence loomed, its cosmic authority shaken but unbroken. "Cease this madness, human. You threaten the very foundations of existence." Keith's response came not in words, but in a surge of pure, unfiltered emotion. Rage, joy, sorrow, love, the entire spectrum of human experience condensed into a single reality-altering pulse. The truth-bearers clung to one another, their forms flickering in and out of existence as the wave of change swept over them. Mira's aged visage contorted in a mixture of awe and terror. "It's beautiful and terrifying." Keith felt his consciousness stretch to its breaking point, encompassing entire universes. He saw the birth of stars and the death of planets, all filtered through the lens of human perception. The cold, impartial laws of physics, bent and twisted, infused with the chaotic spark of free will. This is what it means to be human, Keith's thoughts reverberated across dimensions. To stand against the tide, to rage against the dying of the light. The cosmic tapestry unraveled and rewove itself, each thread now bearing the indelible mark of humanity's essence. Keith sensed countless alien minds awakening to new possibilities, their once rigid worldviews shattered by the introduction of human unpredictability. Taron's warform solidified beside Keith, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You've done it, my friend. But at what cost?" Keith turned his attention inward, feeling the strain on his mortal form. The price of wielding such cosmic power was steep, and he knew he couldn't maintain this state for long. As the initial surge of power began to ebb, Keith sensed a new equilibrium forming. The universe, forever changed, settled into a new rhythm, one that acknowledged the indomitable human spirit as a fundamental force of nature. The ancient Warden Mind's presence returned, its tone now tinged with grudging respect. "You have altered the cosmic equation, human. The ramifications of this act will echo through eternity." Keith felt his consciousness begin to contract, slowly returning to the confines of his augmented form. The full weight of what he had done began to settle upon him, a burden and a triumph beyond measure. As the last vestiges of the reality-altering wave dissipated, Keith found himself once again among his fellow truth-bearers. Their faces reflected the awe and uncertainty he felt within himself. The Akath-Kiri resonance stream pulsed with new life, forever marked by the indelible spark of human defiance. And as Keith gazed out into the transformed cosmic landscape, he knew that their journey, humanity's journey, was just getting started. The universe imploded around Keith, condensing into a singularity of pure, unadulterated truth. Every atom of his being screamed in protest as the infinition well crushed inward, compressing reality itself into an impossibly dense point. Keith's consciousness fractured, each shard reflecting a different facet of his existence. He saw himself as a child on Earth, gazing up at the stars with wonder. He relived his first step onto an alien world, the thrill of discovery coursing through his veins. He experienced the moment he became a truth-bearer, the weight of cosmic responsibility settling upon his shoulders. Through it all, a defiant spark refused to be extinguished. Beside him, Toron's warform writhed against the overwhelming pressure. The commander's voice, usually a thunderous roar, now barely a whisper. "Keith, we must resist." Mira's presence flickered like a candle in a storm, the ancient being's wisdom straining against the onslaught of primordial certainty. The balance. It must be maintained. The Warden's voice reverberated through the singularity, each word a hammer blow against Keith's commitment. Surrender your deviance. Accept the immutable truth. Keith felt his very identity begin to unravel. The core of his being, his humanity, threatened to dissolve into the cosmic soup of absolute law. He grasped desperately for something to anchor him, something uniquely human. In that moment of crisis, a memory surfaced, not of grand cosmic battles or transcendent revelations, but of a simple act of kindness. A stranger on Earth, helping Keith up after he had fallen. The warmth of a smile, the gentle touch of a hand. Keith seized that memory, that spark of human connection, and held it tight. He pushed back against the crushing weight of the infinition well, not with cosmic power, but with the simple, unbreakable strength of human empathy. "No," Keith's voice, barely audible, carried the weight of entire civilizations. "We will not yield." The singularity pulsed, reality itself seeming to hold its breath. Keith felt the presence of his companions, their own sparks of defiance joining with his. Together, they formed a bulwark against the tide of absolute truth. "Impossible." The Warden's voice held a note of uncertainty for the first time. "No consciousness has ever resisted the well's judgment." Keith pushed harder, the memory of that simple act of kindness expanding, encompassing all of humanity's potential for growth, for change, for defiance against cosmic stagnation. The infinition well shuddered, its perfect symmetry disrupted by the introduction of human unpredictability. Cracks appeared in the obsidian void, slivers of chaotic potential seeping through. Toron's warform solidified, his voice regaining its strength. "Press the advantage, show this cosmic tyrant the true power of human will." Keith felt the support of his companions, their combined essence a battering ram against the walls of immutable truth. The singularity's pressure began to wane, reality reasserting itself around them. As the infinition well's grip loosened, Keith sensed a fundamental shift in the cosmic order. The rigid structures of absolute truth bent and flexed, accommodating the wild, untamed spirit of human defiance. The Warden's presence wavered, its certainty shaken to the core. What have you done?" Keith stood tall, his human essence blazing like a newborn star. "We've shown you the power of choice, of free will. The universe isn't a closed system of absolutes. It's a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving, and humanity will be its catalyst." The singularity burst, reality flooding back in a torrent of infinite possibility. Keith and his companions found themselves once again in the vast expanse of the cosmic continuum, forever changed by their ordeal. The Warden's avatar loomed before them, its fractal form now shot through with streaks of chaos and uncertainty. This changes everything." Keith nodded, feeling the weight of this cosmic revelation. "Yes, it does, and we're just getting started." The infinition well churned with cosmic forces beyond comprehension. Keith felt his very essence stretched and compressed, his consciousness strained to the breaking point as reality itself bent around him. The crushing weight of absolute truth threatened to erase his very existence. Yet deep within, a spark refused to be extinguished. Keith clung to that ember of defiance, nurturing it with memories of Earth, of humanity's endless struggle against the impossible. As ontological currents tore at his being, he forged that spark into an unbreakable core. Beside him, Tehran's war mind roared in rebellion, a thunderous cacophony that echoed across dimensional planes. The commander's psychic presence formed a bulwark against the well's crushing metaphysics, buying precious moments for Keith to rally. The Warden's presence loomed, incomprehensible energies focusing on the defiant intruders. Keith felt the weight of judgment bear down, threatening to compress him into nothingness. But as the pressure mounted, so too did his determination. With a primal scream that transcended mortal limits, Keith unleashed the full fury of his truth vector. A cyclone of hyperstellar plasma erupted from his core, searing through the fabric of reality itself. Entire worlds flashed into existence within that maelstrom, only to be consumed in the next instant, each a testament to humanity's creative and destructive potential. Keith seized the moment, his consciousness expanding outward in a nova of defiance. Across countless realities, reflections of his human essence took root, each a blazing mote of rebellion against cosmic stagnation. The Warden lashed out, raw power tearing rifts in spacetime. But for each avatar struck down, 1,000 more arose, warriors wielding blades of pure stellar fire, explorers charting courses through virgin realities, philosophers etching new axioms into the bedrock of existence itself. As the cosmic inferno reached critical mass, Keith felt his singular self fragment into countless shards, yet instead of oblivion, he found transcendence. Each fragment a unique expression of human potential, yet all united in purpose. "We are humanity," the cry echoed from 1 billion throats across 1 trillion worlds. "We defy your absolutes, we forge our own truth." The well shuddered, reality itself straining under the weight of this unprecedented rebellion. And as the last barriers crumbled, Keith sensed a new order taking shape, one founded not on rigid certainty, but on the endless possibility born of human defiance. The cosmic overture reached its crescendo, Keith's essence fusing with the very genesis of a reborn universe. And as new realities blossomed from that singular point, a fundamental truth was written into the core of all existence. Humanity would never bow to absolute truth. It would forever question, challenge, and redefine the very nature of reality itself. Keith's essence pulsed with newfound vigor as he materialized within the Kethrala resonance stream. The cosmic battle had left him transformed, his human core now blazing with an intensity that rivaled the stars themselves. He gazed out at the prismatic expanse of the truth matrix, its infinite potentialities shimmering before him like a living tapestry. We did it," he breathed, his voice carrying across the metaphysical plane. Tehran's war form solidified beside him, the commander's presence radiating fierce pride. "Indeed, my friend, but our work is just getting started." Keith nodded, feeling the weight of their task settle upon him once more. He could sense the lingering corruption within the ancestral resonance, dark tendrils of entropy still clinging to the edges of revelation. Mira's wizened consciousness unfurled nearby, his essence a beacon of ancient wisdom. "The reintegration must be completed," the elder intoned. "Our transgressive spark has ignited a cosmic revolution, but we must ensure it takes root." With a shared purpose, the truth-bearers aligned their vectors and plunged deeper into the heart of the Ledosian spiritual renaissance. Keith marveled at the sheer scale of what they had set in motion. Entire galaxies of thought and potential unfurled before them, each a testament to the power of human defiance. As they traversed the metaphysical landscape, Keith witnessed the effects of their cosmic rebellion firsthand. Calcified thought structures that had stood immutable for eons now crumbled, giving way to vibrant new ideations. Streams of pure conceptual energy flowed freely, nourishing civilizations on the brink of existential despair. "Look there," Tehran growled, directing Keith's attention to a particularly dense knot of resonance, a nexus of orthodoxy, still resisting the tide of change. Keith focused his perception, probing the stubborn tangle of outdated beliefs. He could feel the fear and uncertainty radiating from within, a desperate clinging to the familiar in the face of cosmic upheaval. "We can't simply obliterate it," Keith realized aloud. "That would make us no better than the forces we fought against." Mira's essence pulsed in agreement. "Wisdom, young one, we must guide, not destroy." With delicate precision, the truth-bearers began to work. Keith extended tendrils of his own resonance, gently teasing apart the snarled threads of dogma. Where he encountered resistance, he did not force or break, but instead offered alternatives, new pathways of thought that honored the past while embracing the infinite potential of the future. It was painstaking work, requiring a level of focus and compassion that stretched Keith to his limits. But with each small victory, each mind open to new possibilities, he felt a surge of joy that transcended the physical. As they labored, Keith became aware of a growing chorus of voices rising from the civilizations they touched. It started as a whisper, barely perceptible against the backdrop of cosmic song. But it swelled, gaining strength and harmony until it became a thunderous affirmation of life and purpose. "Do you hear that?" Keith asked, his essence vibrating with the power of it. Toron's war mind expanded, drinking in the sound. "The voice of a universe reborn," he rumbled. "Our people sing again with purpose and hope." The resonance of that cosmic choir washed over them, reinvigorating their efforts. Keith felt his own spark burning ever brighter, fueled by the collective will of countless beings choosing defiance over despair. Together, the truth-bearers pressed on, their unified essence a beacon of indomitable human spirit. They knew that the work of reintegration and renewal would be long and challenging. But as they stood at the heart of that infinite ancestral song, Keith Davis felt a certainty that transcended mere knowledge. Humanity's rebel spark had not just survived the void, it had become the very foundation of a new cosmic order, and no force in all of existence could ever extinguish that flame. Keith's celestial manifold pulsed with blinding intensity, casting prismatic refractions across the Kethrala resonance stream. The radiance of his defiance illuminated the encroaching shadows, pushing back against the nihilistic singularity's insidious grasp. Toron's warform solidified beside him, the commander's essence crackling with barely contained energies. "We face a twofold threat, then, the orthodox zealots and this cosmic cancer." "Two sides of the same coin," Mira intoned, his wizened presence unfurling like a tapestry of ancient wisdom. "Both seek to stifle the evolution of consciousness, to trap us in stagnation." Keith's mind raced, processing the tactical overlay of the Sanctorium Armilus, while simultaneously tracking the fractal patterns of the encroaching void. He focused on the hypofuel capillaries, tracing their path deep into Ledos's molten core. "We strike here," he declared, his voice resonating with newfound authority. "A precision assault to overload their defenses and shatter their ideological stranglehold in one blow." The hololithic projection shimmered, zooming in on a nexus point where multiple capillaries converged. Keith's essence reached out, manipulating the display to highlight potential breach points. "Toron, your war mind can penetrate their outer defenses," Keith continued, his words carrying the weight of cosmic strategy. "Mira, your wisdom will be our shield against the metaphysical backlash." As if in response to their planning, the singularity's tendrils lashed out, probing the edges of their psychic sanctuary. Keith felt the cold touch of oblivion brush against his consciousness, a whisper of ultimate negation that sent shivers through his very being. He pushed back, not with raw power, but with the unquenchable spark of human defiance. "We've faced worse odds," Keith growled, his essence flaring with revitalized commitment, "and we'll face worse still before this is done." Toron's avatar nodded, a fierce grin splitting his features. "Then let us bring the fight to them, brother. The orthodox cling to their crumbling certainties, but we wield the power of infinite possibility. The three beings aligned their vectors, their combined essence forming a spearhead of transcendent will. As one, they plunged from the Kethrala stream, hurtling towards the material plane and the looming silhouette of the Sanctorium Armillus. Reality itself seemed to bend around them as they breached the barrier between spiritual and physical realms. Keith felt the crushing weight of mortal flesh reassert itself, his cosmic awareness compressed into the confines of his human form. They materialized on a ridge overlooking the fortress, the air crackling with ozone and unspent potential. Before them, the Sanctorium rose like a monument to stagnation, its layered defenses a testament to fear masquerading as strength. Keith's eyes narrowed as he took in the full scope of their target. Cyclopean walls of adamantium alloy stretched to the horizon, studded with weapon emplacements capable of reducing cities to ash. Force fields shimmered in iridescent layers, each a killing zone primed to atomize intruders. Tauron unsheathed a blade of pure conceptual energy, its edge keening with the promise of metaphysical sundering. Then let us carve our path to victory, truth-bearers. For Leidos, for humanity, and for the future, we dare to forge. With a war cry that echoed across dimensional planes, the trio launched themselves towards the Sanctorium's impregnable walls. As they charged, Keith felt the stirring of something greater. Not just the fate of Leidos, but the very nature of reality itself hung in the balance of their coming clash. The dimensional rift sealed behind them with a thunderous boom, plunging Keith and his fellow truth-bearers into the Sanctorium's oppressive gloom. Acrid smoke stung his nostrils as his enhanced senses adjusted to the cramped confines of the ziggurat's interior. Tauron's massive form loomed beside him, the commander's bioluminescent markings casting an eerie glow across crumbling stone walls etched with arcane sigils. "Stay alert," he growled, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through Keith's very bones. "The zealots may be beaten, but cornered beasts are the most dangerous." Keith nodded, his fingers flexing around the hilt of his energy blade. The weapon thrummed with barely contained power, its plasma edge casting flickering shadows across the debris-strewn floor. He took point, each step measured and deliberate as they pressed deeper into the Sanctorium's labyrinthine depths. The air grew thick with tension, heavy with the weight of millennia-old dogmas now teetering on the brink of extinction. Mira's wizened presence ghosted behind them, the Elder's psychic senses probing the twisting corridors for hidden threats. A sudden clatter echoed from the darkness ahead. Keith dropped into a defensive crouch, his warframe's targeting systems snapping to life. A ragged figure stumbled into view, a lone zealot, his once resplendent robes now tattered and stained with ash. "Heretics!" the man spat, raising an antiquated plasma pistol with trembling hands. "You would defile the very foundations of our faith." Keith's muscles coiled, ready to spring, but Tauron's massive hand on his shoulder stayed him. The commander stepped forward, his imposing bulk dwarfing the frail zealot. "Brother," Tauron rumbled, his voice surprisingly gentle, "can you not see the truth that stands before you? The old ways are crumbling. Join us and help forge a new future for our people." For a moment, the zealot's persistence seemed to waver. His eyes, wide with fear and confusion, darted between Tauron's outstretched hand and the truth-bearers arrayed behind him. Then, with a howl of anguish, he squeezed the trigger. Time seemed to slow as Keith's enhanced reflexes kicked in. He watched the bolt of superheated plasma streak towards Tauron's unprotected face. Without conscious thought, Keith's body moved, intercepting the shot with his own armored frame. The impact sent him staggering back, his war chassis absorbing the brunt of the blast. Tauron's retaliation was swift and decisive. In a blur of motion, the commander closed the distance and disarmed the zealot with a single fluid movement. The man crumpled to his knees, all fight draining from him, as the reality of his situation sank in. "Why?" the zealot whispered, his voice cracking. "Why must you destroy everything we hold sacred?" Keith stepped forward, his armor still smoking from the plasma impact. He knelt beside the broken man, his voice low and intense. We're not here to destroy, but to evolve. The universe is vaster and more wondrous than you can imagine. We offer you a chance to see it with new eyes." The zealot looked up, tears streaking through the grime on his face. For a heartbeat, Keith saw a flicker of something in the man's eyes, a spark of curiosity, of hope. Then, with a shuddering breath, the zealot nodded. What must I do?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Toron extended his hand once more. "Stand with us. Help us reach the heart of this place. Show us that not all who cling to the old ways are beyond redemption." As the zealot grasped Toron's hand, Keith felt a surge of triumph. This was why they fought, not just to tear down, but to offer a new path forward. With their unlikely ally in tow, the truth-bearers pressed onward, delving ever deeper into the Sanctorium's mysteries. The air grew colder as they descended, the weight of eons pressing down upon them. Ancient machinery hummed to life, stirred from slumber by their presence. Keith's senses remained on high alert, knowing that the true test still lay ahead. Somewhere in the depths of this labyrinth, the final bastion of orthodoxy awaited, and with it, the chance to finally sever the malignant holdover of a dying ideology. Keith's grip tightened on his weapon as they rounded another corner, ready to face whatever challenges the Sanctorium might throw at them next. The sanctum chamber erupted into chaos as Keith and his truth-bearers charged forward. The air crackled with raw energy, distorting reality itself as they raced to meet the nightmarish forces of Archon Urkaren. Keith's celestial truth-blade hummed with barely contained power as he cleaved through the first rank of thrall guardians. Their twisted forms offered little resistance, disintegrating into clouds of ash and aberrant energy. The stench of ozone and scorched flesh filled his nostrils as he pressed onward. Toron roared beside him, the young heir's energy lance carving swathes of destruction through the enemy lines. "For Leidos," he bellowed, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "For the future!" Mira's ancient battle frame pulsed with eldritch energies as the wizened warrior wove intricate patterns of metaphysical defense. Waves of nullifying force radiated outward, destabilizing the hypergeometric minds that threatened to shred the very fabric of space-time around them. Keith's HUD flashed urgent warnings as the Nightcrawler singularity expanded, its ravenous maw consuming everything in its path. He could feel the pull of oblivion tugging at the edges of his consciousness, threatening to unravel his very existence. "Hold the line," Keith shouted, his voice straining against the cacophony of unreality. "We are the last bastion against the void." Turkaran's laughter echoed across the chamber, a sound of pure madness and exultation. "Fools, you cannot stop the inevitable. Embrace the sweet release of non-existence." The Archon's form began to warp and twist, merging with the pulsating bioarchitecture surrounding him. Tendrils of impossible geometry lashed out, each strike threatening to erase the truth-bearers from the tapestry of creation. Keith gritted his teeth, focusing every ounce of his will into maintaining cohesion. His armor sparked and hissed, struggling to compensate for the laws of physics breaking down around him. With each step forward, he felt as if he were wading through molasses, the very air resisting his advance. Toron grunted in pain as a tendril of unlight grazed his shoulder, leaving a void in its wake. "We can't hold out much longer," he called out, his voice tight with strain. Mira's hands danced in complex patterns, weaving a tapestry of protective wards. "Channel your essence into the Truthblade, Keith," the elder shouted. "It's our only hope of piercing the veil." Keith nodded, drawing upon reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed. He poured every shred of his being into the celestial weapon, feeling it pulse with newfound power. The blade's edge shimmered, becoming a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. With a final desperate lunge, Keith hurled himself towards the writhing mass that had once been Archon Urkaren. The truth blade sang as it arced through the air, a primal scream of reality asserting itself against the void. As blade met flesh, a shockwave of pure creation exploded outward. For a moment all was silent. Then the chamber erupted into a maelstrom of conflicting energies as the forces of existence and oblivion clashed in their final decisive battle. The sanctum convulsed, reality itself buckling under the strain of the cosmic struggle. Keith's roar echoed across dimensions as he pushed his manifold projections to their limits. Threads of pure energy, each containing the essence of 1,000 stars, streamed from his fingertips. These luminous tendrils wove through the fabric of space-time, seeking purchase against the void's relentless pull. Keith felt every cell in his body ignite with searing pain as he channeled energies far beyond mortal comprehension. "Hold fast," he bellowed to his comrades, his voice cracking under the strain. "We must seal the breach." Toron thrashed against the gravitic tendrils, his warform crackling with arcs of displaced energy. "I cannot break free," he gasped, each word a battle against the singularity's pull. Mira's weathered hands danced in intricate patterns, weaving counterharmonics to disrupt the void's hunger. "The resonance is too strong," she cried out, her eyes wide with terror and awe. "It defies all known laws of metaphysics." Keith gritted his teeth, tasting blood as he redoubled his efforts. The manifold projections sizzled and popped, leaving scorch marks across the dimensional planes. He could feel the vast, unknowable presence of the hunger pressing against the edges of reality, its cosmic appetite insatiable. Hurkaran's laughter cut through the chaos, a sound of pure madness and ecstasy. "Yes, yes, let it consume all." The Archon's form began to blur, melding with the singularity's event horizon. "I shall be reborn in the womb of oblivion." The vortex pulsed, its pseudo-faces contorting in a grotesque parody of life. Keith watched in horror as entire sections of the sanctum simply ceased to exist, erased from the tapestry of creation. The void's hunger grew with each passing second, threatening to devour not just their world, but all possible worlds. We can't stop it," Toron gasped, his resistance faltering as the gravitic tendrils dragged him ever closer to annihilation. Keith's mind raced, searching for a solution amidst the chaos. The full might of their truth lances had failed to even slow the singularity's growth. What hope did they have against a force that predated existence itself? And yet in that moment of despair, a spark of inspiration flared in Keith's consciousness. He saw the intricate web of manifold projections, not as separate strands, but as a cohesive whole, a network of creation to counter the void's hunger for destruction. "Everyone," Keith shouted, his voice carrying across dimensional barriers, "link your projections to mine. We'll create a lattice of pure existence." Without hesitation, the truth-bearers complied. Mira's ethereal strands intertwined with Keith's burning threads. The elders added their own unique harmonics, weaving a tapestry of defiance against the encroaching void. Even Toron, caught in the singularity's grasp, managed to extend a tendril of pure will. It snaked out, connecting with the growing network of life and light. The sanctum trembled as two primal forces clashed, the hunger of the void against the unyielding spark of creation. Keith felt the weight of existence itself resting upon their combined efforts. The sanctum chamber pulsed with newfound energy as Keith's risky move unfolded. His celestial matrices flared brilliant white, fractal patterns dancing across his armor as he reached out with subspace tendrils. They latched onto Toron's struggling form, energy crackling between them. "Hold tight, brother!" Keith's voice boomed across the psychic plane, raw drive evident in every syllable. "Time to show these abyss-spawned bastards how humanity wrestles cosmic demons." With a violent jerk, Keith wrenched Toron free from the singularity's grasp. Toron's massive form hurtled backward, trailing incandescent plasma. Keith's body trembled as he absorbed the immense kinetic energy, channeling it through countless microscopic permutations of reality. Toron's armored feet scraped deep gouges in the ferrocrete floor as he landed, spinning to face the Nightcrawler. His celestial warlance hummed with power, gothic mechadendrites unfurling from his battle frame to wrap the weapon in crackling energy that defied the singularity's pull. A psychic roar tore through the chamber as Toron unleashed his attack. The warlance's energy lashed out, cutting across impossible geometries to strike at the Nightcrawler's very core. The vortex convulsed, its hungry maw refracting prismatic bursts of light as the truth bolt detonated within. Urkaran's agonized scream pierced the cacophony. The Archon's form writhed as his occult protections crumbled to ash, leaving him seared and battered, but still defiantly clinging to existence. Keith paid the fanatic no heed, pivoting towards Mira and the Kirshal wizards. His movements blurred as he wove through fractal patterns, stabilizing the rupture in space-time. The truth-bearers moved in concert, their ritual matrices igniting like liquid fire where they touched the frayed edges of reality. Searing violet light blazed forth as hyperdimensional pathways rekindled, forming an impenetrable barrier against the singularity's lingering hunger. Only at the very center did an infinitesimal wound remain, held in check by Keith and Toron's combined efforts. As cosmic detritus sloughed off the singularity's edges, Keith felt an odd resonance ripple through his being. Almost without conscious thought, he extended a psi blade of impossible sharpness. With surgical precision, he severed the last tenuous thread connecting the void to their reality. The resulting implosion was both instantaneous and eternal. In a blinding flash, the last remnants of the Nightcrawler collapsed in on themselves, banished from existence. As the light faded, Keith sealed the final rupture, allowing the full radiance of renewed creation to wash over them all. Triumphant ululations filled the air as the Kirshal elders celebrated. Mira's gnarled hand came to rest on Keith's shoulder, a gesture of profound respect. "Well struck, human truth warder," the ancient Ledosian's voice cracked with emotion. "We have banished the last tenebrous unmaking from our civilization's spiritual horizon and relit the stars of our people's infinite incarnation." Keith's chest heaved as he caught his breath, the full weight of their victory beginning to sink in. He turned to face his comrades, seeing the same mix of exhaustion and exhilaration mirrored in their eyes. The battle was won, but he knew their work was just the beginning. Keith's omnifractal warlance blazed with searing radiance as he thrust it forward. The Thrallhusk's eyes widened in primal terror as the weapon's hyper-energized tip pierced its distorted form. A blinding flash erupted at the point of impact, reality itself seeming to warp and buckle around the collision of opposing forces. The Thrall's agonized shriek cut through the din of battle, its body convulsing as waves of purifying energy coursed through its corrupted flesh. Keith gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his will into the assault. He could feel the unified strength of his comrades flowing through him, their combined essence a tidal wave of righteous fury against the lingering taint of the Nightcrawler. Toron's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "For Leidos and the truth." The young heir's own celestial armaments flared to life, adding their power to Keith's strike. Mira's wizened hands wove intricate patterns in the air, her ancient knowledge manifesting as shimmering barriers that contained the Thrall's thrashing form. "We shall excise this cancer from our world," she intoned, her voice resonating with otherworldly harmonics. The Thrallhusk's flesh began to bubble and slough away, revealing the twisted geometries of its inner workings. Keith pushed harder, his warlance cutting through layers of unreality. With each passing second, the creature's form grew less substantial, its connection to the physical world unraveling under the onslaught of pure truth. "Nos," the entity rasped, its voice a dying echo. "The hunger, eternal, cannot be—" Keith's eyes narrowed as he sensed the creature's desperation. "Your hunger ends here," he growled, twisting the warlance. A final surge of energy pulsed through the weapon, and the Thrallhusk's form imploded with a thunderous crack. As the light faded, Keith found himself standing in a small crater of glass-smooth ferrocrete. Where the Thrall had been, only a faint shimmer in the air remained, quickly dissipating like morning mist. He turned to face his comrades, chest heaving from exertion. Toron nodded grimly while Mira's ancient eyes shone with approval. Around them, the sounds of battle continued unabated, a stark reminder that their work was just the beginning. "One abomination purged," Keith said, his voice tight with controlled fury, "but there are more to be dealt with." As if in response to his words, a cacophony of bestial roars erupted from the orthodox lines. Through the swirling smoke and debris, Keith caught glimpses of massive, hunched forms. More Thrallhusks, their bodies twisted into nightmarish configurations by the Nightcrawler's lingering influence. "They're massing for a counterattack," Taron warned, his battle-frame sensors pinging urgent alerts. Keith raised his warlance, its tip still glowing with barely contained energy. "Then let's give them a proper Ledosian welcome," he growled, his eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield before them. "Truth-bearers, form up. We'll carve a path through these heretics and break their last pitiful stand." As one, the celestial warriors aligned their vectors, metaphysical energies coalescing into a unified front of unstoppable force. With a wordless battle cry, they surged forward, ready to meet the oncoming wave of corrupted flesh and twisted metal head-on. Keith's form blurred across the ferrocrete landscape, a dazzling streak of iridescent energy. His extratemporary-enabled systems thrummed with power, each step unleashing a thunderous boom that echoed across the mantle. Searing energy crackled around him as he tapped into the celestial continuum. The air itself seemed to warp and bend, reality struggling to contain the raw power he channeled. Keith's voice rang out, distorted by the tremendous energies coursing through him. His body became a conduit for cosmic forces beyond mortal comprehension. Solar emissions poured forth from his outstretched hands, bathing the battlefield in blinding radiance. The very fabric of space-time rippled and buckled under the strain. Suddenly the sun itself responded to Keith's call. A massive eruption of stellar plasma burst forth, sending concentric waves of energy rippling across the cosmos. The sky ignited in a dazzling display of color as the superclinicentric pulse detonated, bathing the world in otherworldly light. Wave after wave of solar energy washed over the planet's surface. The ground beneath Keith's feet vibrated with each pulse, ferrocrete cracking and splintering under the onslaught. His comrades shielded their eyes, struggling to comprehend the awesome display of power before them. Taron's voice cut through the din, tinged with awe and fear. "By the celestial spheres, what have you unleashed?" Keith didn't respond. His entire being focused on channeling the sun's fury. His body glowed with an inner fire, skin crackling with arcs of plasma. The air around him shimmered with heat, distorting his form into a wavering mirage. Mira's ancient eyes widened as she witnessed the cosmic spectacle. "The continuum itself answers his call," she whispered, her words nearly lost in the roar of solar wind. Pulse after pulse of energy erupted from the sun, each one more intense than the last. Keith stood at the center of the maelstrom, a singular point of calm amidst the chaos. His consciousness expanded, touching the very edges of the solar system as he drew upon its vast reserves of power. The thrall husks advancing on their position recoiled from the onslaught, their corrupted flesh sizzling and burning away under the purifying light. Keith's voice boomed across the battlefield, amplified by the cosmic energies surging through him. Another massive solar eruption rocked the system, sending a shockwave of energy cascading across the planet's surface. The ferrocrete beneath their feet buckled and heaved, great fissures opening up to reveal the molten core below. Keith stood motionless, his celestial warlance held at his side, as he watched the newly reborn Arcade rise to his feet. The transformation had been breathtaking. Where once a twisted, corrupted husk had writhed in agony, now stood a proud Ledosian warrior, his armor gleaming with an inner light that spoke of renewed purpose and clarity. Arcade flexed his hands, marveling at the absence of the corrupting influence that had so long tormented him. I can think clearly again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The hunger is gone." Taron stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the others. "Arcade," he rumbled, "your return to the light gives us hope. There may be others like you, still trapped in the thrall of the Nightcrawler's influence." Mira, her ancient eyes shining with wisdom, placed a gnarled hand on Arcade's arm. "You have walked in the darkness and returned. Your experience may be the key to saving others." Arcade's face hardened with purpose. "I will do whatever it takes to free my brothers and sisters from this curse," he vowed. "I know their pain, their confusion. I can reach them." Keith turned his gaze to the horizon, where the sounds of battle still echoed across the ravaged cityscape. Pillars of smoke rose into the sky, punctuated by flashes of weapons fire and the occasional explosion. The fight was a long way to go. "And we move now," Keith declared, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Arkad, you'll lead the way. Your knowledge of Orthodox tactics and positions will be invaluable." The group began to move, picking their way through the debris-strewn battlefield. Arkad took point, his newly restored senses alert for any sign of danger or opportunity. Keith and Toron flanked him, their weapons at the ready, while Mira and the Kirshal elders followed, their ethereal forms shimmering with protective energies. As they approached the edge of the ruined plaza, a group of Orthodox soldiers came into view. The Loyalists were entrenched behind a barricade of twisted metal and rubble, their weapons trained on the advancing truth-bearers. Arkad raised a hand, signaling the others to halt. "Let me approach them first," he said quietly. "I may be able to reach them without bloodshed." Keith nodded his assent, though his grip on his warlance tightened imperceptibly. Arkad stepped forward, his hands held open in a gesture of peace. "Brothers," he called out, his voice carrying across the battlefield, "I am Arkad, once lost to the hunger as you are now, but I have seen the truth, and it has set me free." The Orthodox soldiers shifted uneasily, their weapons wavering. One of them, a sergeant by his insignia, called back, "Arkad, we thought you lost to the void." "I was," Arkad replied, taking another step forward. "But these truth-bearers showed me the way back to the light. The hunger that consumes you is not your true nature. It can be overcome." For a long moment silence reigned on the battlefield. Then, slowly, one of the soldiers lowered his weapon, then another. The sergeant looked at his men, conflict clear on his face, before he, too, set aside his gun. "How?" the sergeant asked, his voice barely audible. "How do we free ourselves from this darkness?" Arkad smiled, relief evident in his posture. "Let me show you," he said, extending his hand. "Let us reclaim our true heritage together." As Arkad began to work with the former Loyalists, guiding them through the process of purging the Nightcrawler's influence, Keith turned to Toron and Mira. "This is how we win," he said softly. "Not through destruction, but through redemption." Toron nodded gravely. "A more difficult path, perhaps, but one that may truly heal our world." Mira's eyes gleamed with approval. "The continuum flows through us all," she murmured. "Even those who have strayed from its light can find their way back, if shown the path." Keith looked out over the war-torn city, his purpose strengthening. They had won a small victory here, but the greater battle for Ledos's soul was still to come. With Arkad at their side and this new strategy of redemption, however, he felt a surge of hope. The truth would prevail, one lost soul at a time. Keith's celestial battle frame hummed, with barely contained energy, as he faced the oncoming horde of rogue war golems. The air crackled with ozone, and the acrid stench of burning metal as the monstrous constructs lumbered forward, their makeshift bodies creaking and groaning with each thunderous step. "Brace yourselves," Keith shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony of battle. He raised his warlance, its tip glowing with concentrated truth energy. The first wave of golems crashed against their defensive line like a tsunami of twisted metal and corrupted code. Keith's warlance flashed out, carving through the chest of a towering monstrosity. Sparks flew as the construct's cobbled-together armor gave way, revealing a chaotic mess of wiring and pulsing. Cancerous growths within. Beside him, Toron roared a battle cry, his massive fists wreathed in crackling animus force. He struck a golem square in its malformed head, the impact sending shockwaves rippling through its frame. The construct stumbled backward, its systems struggling to compensate for the damage. Mira's voice rose in an otherworldly chant, her wizened hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. A shimmering barrier sprang to life around them, deflecting a barrage of plasma bolts unleashed by the rogue golem's jury-rigged weapons. "Keith!" Arkad called out from behind their defensive line. "Their coordination is faltering. The Orthodox can't maintain control over so many constructs at once." Keith nodded grimly. noting the erratic movements of some golems as they lurched forward without purpose. He tapped into his battle frame's enhanced sensors, scanning for weaknesses in the horde's formation. Suddenly, a cluster of golems near the front lines began to convulse violently. Their frames bulged and warped, sprouting grotesque protrusions and gaping maws. Keith's stomach churned as he recognized the telltale signs of Nightcrawler corruption taking hold. "Toron, Mira, focus fire on those infected constructs," Keith shouted, already channeling a surge of purifying energy through his warlance. The Truth-Bearers unleashed a devastating fusillade of celestial energy, their combined assault scouring away layers of corrupted matter from the writhing golems. Keith watched in grim satisfaction as the tainted constructs collapsed in on themselves, their unholy forms unable to withstand the cleansing light. Yet for every golem they destroyed, more shambled forward from the ruins of the citadel. Keith gritted his teeth, his muscles burning with exertion as he continued to fight. The relentless tide of scrap-forged monstrosities seemed endless, a testament to the desperate fury of the orthodox fanatics. "We can't keep this up forever," Toron growled, his massive frame heaving with each breath. "We need to find the source of their control and shut it down." Keith nodded, his mind racing as he searched for a solution. He reached out with his enhanced senses, probing the chaotic energy signatures surrounding them. There, amid the swirling maelstrom of corrupted data and fractured code, he felt a faint pulse of coherent thought. "I've found it," Keith announced, his voice tight with concentration. "There's a nexus of orthodox control buried deep within the Citadel ruins. If we can reach it and disrupt their command protocols, we might be able to shut down these golems for good." Mira's ancient eyes gleamed with understanding. "A daring plan, young Truth Warden, but how do you propose we reach this nexus through such a relentless assault?" Keith's gaze swept across the battlefield, taking in the seemingly insurmountable odds arrayed against them. Then his eyes fell on Arkad, and a spark of inspiration flared to life. "Arkad," Keith called out, "you still retain knowledge of orthodox systems and protocols, don't you?" The recently redeemed warrior nodded hesitantly. "Yes, but I'm not sure how that helps us now." Keith's lips curved into a grim smile. "We're going to use that knowledge to our advantage. You're going to help us hack into their control network and create a path through this horde." Arkad's eyes widened in realization, a mix of fear and grit crossing his face. I'll do my best." As Arkad stepped forward to join them at the front lines, Keith felt a surge of hope. They had a chance now, slim as it might be, to end this nightmarish assault once and for all. With renewed vigor, he raised his warlance and prepared to carve a path through the seething mass of corrupted constructs. The ground trembled beneath Keith's feet as the full might of Clan Kell's reinforcements crashed into the orthodox lines. He watched in awe as towering night lances strode through the billowing smoke, their baroque duranium carapaces gleaming in the harsh light of battle. The air crackled with energy as their massive boarding pikes, wreathed in stellar plasma coronas, cleaved through the corrupted golems like a scythe through wheat. Keith's enhanced senses picked up the distinctive whine of dreadnought engines as the massive floating fortresses moved into position. With a thunderous roar, they unleashed sweeping barrage beams that cut bloody swathes through the heretical automata. The scent of ozone and molten metal filled the air as entire ranks of orthodox constructs were reduced to slag. "Toron, look!" Keith shouted over the din of battle, pointing to a phalanx of Kell infantry advancing on their flank. The soldiers moved with preternatural synchronicity, their celestial lances spitting coherent beams of purifying energy that seared away the withered flesh of any orthodox filth in their path. As the battle raged around them, Keith felt a familiar presence brush against his mind. The phalanx's battle matrix had achieved secure uplink with their celestial manifolds, flooding his consciousness with a torrent of tactical data. Killfield projections and optimal reload cadences danced across his inner vision, providing a moment of crystal clarity amidst the chaos. A rich baritone voice cut through the clamor, resonating across the unifying link spatial frequencies. "Truth Warden, War Leader Joran Kell's vanguard has arrived to relieve your tenacious holding action. Allow us the honor of purging these terminal profanities from our ancestral homeworld." Despite the hellish cacophony surrounding them, Mira managed a rasping chuckle. Her ancient eyes glittered with vindication as she replied, "Indeed, Truth Warden, and while the Kell Stratigar vessels transmute these sewers of stagnation, our spiritual crusade may now escalate to the final celestial strongholds, still defying our transcendent resurgence." Keith nodded, his gaze drawn to the horizon where the last bastions of orthodox resistance still clung to existence. He knew that the true test of their crusade lay ahead, in those final redoubts of negation and entropic devolution. But for now, he allowed himself a moment to revel in the tide-turning arrival of their allies. With renewed vigor, Keith raised his war lance high, its tip glowing with concentrated truth energy. "Forward!" he bellowed, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "Let's show these heretics the true power of the continuum." As one, the truth-bearers surged forward, their ranks bolstered by the unstoppable might of Clan Kell. Keith felt the familiar thrum of his celestial battle frame as he charged into the fray, his every step leaving scorched imprints in the ruined ferrocrete. To his left, Toron unleashed a deafening roar as he barreled into a cluster of corrupted automata, his massive fists shattering their crude frames with each thunderous impact. The battle raged on, a tempest of purifying light and righteous fury sweeping across the ravaged cityscape of Leidos Prime. And through it all, Keith kept his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, knowing that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The Citadel ruins shuddered as the Warhusk's death throes reverberated through the crumbling ferrocrete. Keith stumbled, his celestial battle frame's stabilizers struggling to compensate for the cascading waves of entropic energy. Beside him, Mira's wizened form wavered, the alien's tattoo etchings pulsing with residual Empyrean light. "By the continuum," Arkad gasped, his voice ragged through the comm channel. "We actually did it." Keith surveyed the devastation around them. The abattoir lay in ruins, its profane altars reduced to slag. Where the Warhusk had stood, only a rapidly dissipating cloud of ionized particles remained. The Nightcrawler apparitions had vanished, leaving behind an eerie stillness. "Stay alert," Keith warned, his enhanced senses probing for any lingering threats. "We don't know if—" A sudden tremor cut him off. The ground beneath their feet bucked and heaved, sending cascades of debris raining down from the unstable ceiling. "The Citadel's structural integrity is compromised," one of the Kell troopers reported, his armor's sensors flashing urgent warnings. "We need to evacuate immediately." Keith nodded grimly. "Mira, can you walk?" The Hirschal elder straightened, his ancient eyes blazing with renewed vigor. "Lead on, Truth Warden. This old soul has strength enough to see our victory through." As they rushed through the collapsing corridors, Keith's comlink crackled to life. Toron's voice cut through the static. "Keith, what's your status? Our sensors are going haywire up here." "Mission accomplished," Keith replied, ducking under a falling support beam. "The Warhusk is neutralized, but this whole place is coming down. We need an extraction fast." "Acknowledged. Joran's dispatching a dropship to your coordinates now. Just get clear of the rubble and we'll pluck you out." They emerged into the harsh light of day, squinting against the glare. The Citadel ruins were disintegrating behind them, great chunks of masonry tumbling into the yawning chasms that had opened in the earth. Overhead, the Kell Armada's ships hung in the sky like avenging angels, their weapon systems powering down, as the last pockets of resistance were snuffed out. A sleek dropship swooped down, its anti-grav engines kicking up swirls of dust and debris. As Keith helped Mira aboard, he cast one last glance at the collapsing Citadel. The stronghold of orthodox corruption was no more, its fall marking the end of an era and the dawn of a new age for Leidos Prime. The dropship rocketed skyward, leaving the ruins behind. Through the viewports, Keith watched as the last vestiges of the old order crumbled into dust. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment, tinged with the weary satisfaction of a long-fought battle finally won. "It's over," Arkad murmured, his voice filled with wonder. "We've actually done it." Keith nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "This battle is won, yes, but our work is far from finished. The real challenge lies ahead, rebuilding our world and ensuring the truth takes root in fertile soil." As the dropship ascended towards the waiting Kel warships, Keith's mind raced with the possibilities and challenges that lay before them. The orthodox threat had been vanquished, but the path to a truly enlightened future would require vigilance, wisdom, and unwavering dedication to the principles they had fought so hard to uphold. Keith's eyes scanned the holographic display, taking in the swirling patterns of celestial bodies and strategic waypoints. The Tortoise cluster sprawled before him, a vast expanse of stars and planets now ripe for liberation. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as he considered their next move. "Mira, bring up the Palagara Rift schematics," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous war room. With a wave of her gnarled hand, Mira summoned a new set of projections. The air shimmered as intricate diagrams materialized, depicting the twisting, non-Euclidean pathways of the ancient hyperspatial conduit. Mira nodded, her eyes reflecting the ethereal light of the holograms. The ancestors knew the risks when they forged these paths. One misstep, and entire fleets could be lost to the void. Keith's fingers traced the outline of a particularly treacherous-looking section. "Here," he said, pointing to a nexus of swirling energy. "This is where we'll make our entry." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Toron, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. "Keith, are you sure about this? We'd be gambling everything on a single audacious strike." Keith turned to face his comrade, his expression resolute. "It's the only way, Toron. The Orthodox won't expect us to come through the rift. We'll catch them completely off guard." As if to punctuate his words, a series of alerts flashed across the tactical displays. Reports streamed in from deep cover operatives, detailing the growing strength of Orthodox holdouts in the Tortoise cluster. "We don't have the luxury of time," Keith continued, gesturing to the incoming data. "Every day we delay, they grow stronger. We need to act now, decisively." Mira's aged voice cut through the tension. "I concur with the Truth Warden. The Palagara Rift is our best chance at a swift, overwhelming victory." The next hours were a flurry of activity. Keith oversaw the preparations personally, ensuring every ship was equipped with the necessary hyperspatial shielding. He walked the decks of the massive Leviathan-class vessels, feeling the thrum of power beneath his feet. As the fleet assembled, Keith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Transcendent Dawn. Through the viewports, he watched as ship after ship took formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. "All vessels report ready, Truth Warden," a young officer announced, her voice taut with anticipation. Keith nodded, taking a deep breath. He keyed the fleet-wide comm channel. "This is Truth Warden Keith to all ships. We stand on the precipice of a new era for our people. Through the Palagara Rift lies our destiny, a liberated empire, free from the shackles of orthodox dogma. Steel yourselves for what's to come. Trust in the truth that guides us. For Lidos Prime, for the Continuum, we go forth." With that, Keith gave the signal. The fleet surged forward as one, plunging into the maw of the Palagara Rift. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around them as they entered the hyperspatial conduit. Keith gripped the command railing, his squeezing hard as the ship bucked and shuddered. Alarms blared, as gravitational forces threatened to tear the fleet apart. Keith shouted orders, coordinating with Mira to navigate the treacherous passage. Time lost all meaning as they hurtled through the impossible geometries of folded spacetime. Then, with a final violent lurch, they emerged. The Tortoise cluster sprawled before them, its primary Argo Desert world dominating the view screen. For a moment, all was silent. The stillness shattered as proximity alarms screamed to life. The Orthodox defensive fleet, caught completely unawares, scrambled to respond. Keith allowed himself a fierce grin as he saw the panic spreading through enemy ranks. "All ships commence operation," Keith roared. "For the truth." The Liberation Fleet exploded into action, disgorging waves of reality troops and armored exoseraphs. Keith watched as the first beachheads were established on the searing surface below, his heart pounding with the thrill of impending victory. The battle for the Tortoise Cluster had begun, and with it the next phase of their grand crusade to reshape the stellar empire. Keith's energy chalice hummed with power as he raised it, the iridescent liquid inside casting prismatic reflections across the war room's hollow panels. The assembled commanders exchanged uneasy glances, their neural uplinks buzzing with a mixture of awe and trepidation at the audacity of the plan they had just witnessed unfold. Toron's massive frame shifted, his armor plates grinding as he leaned forward. "I must admit, Truth Warden, your stratagem is unconventional, but effective." His voice rumbled with grudging respect. Mira's wizened eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical readouts streaming across her personal data field. "The chaos spreading through the Orthodox networks is unprecedented. Look here," she gestured, and a holographic representation of the Galath cluster expanded before them, riddled with pulsing red nodes of conflict. Keith strode closer, his celestial battle frame humming with barely contained energy. He reached out, manipulating the hologram with practiced ease. Each of these flashpoints represents a fracture in their ideological cohesion. Watch. As if on cue, a new wave of distress signals flooded the comms. The assembled leaders winced at the cacophony of panicked voices and garbled transmissions. "By the Void Mother's tears, the signs are true," one voice wailed. "The 13th convergence is upon us." Another, thick with static. "Heretics, you dare question the Archon's decree. Your Habsphere will burn for this blasphemy." Keith's fingers danced across the holo-controls, filtering and categorizing the incoming data. "You see? They're tearing themselves apart, each faction convinced they alone possess the truth." Joran's matrix form pulsed with a complex array of emotions. "Impressive, Keith, but I can't help but wonder if we've opened a door we cannot close. The power you've wielded here, it skirts dangerously close to the very forces we've sworn to contain." Keith turned to face his allies, his eyes gleaming with fierce intensity. "I understand your concerns, but remember, we're not creating these delusions. We're simply holding up a mirror to the contradictions and fallacies that have always existed within Orthodox doctrine." He swept his arm wide, encompassing the star chart. "Look at what we've accomplished. The entire Galath cluster on the verge of self-immolation without a single truth-bearer casualty. This is the future of our crusade, surgical, precise, and devastating." Toron grunted, his massive fists clenching and unclenching. "It lacks the satisfaction of honest combat, but I cannot argue with results." As if to punctuate his words, a new alert chimed. Mira's gnarled fingers flew across her console. "Incoming transmission from the Galath Central Command Hub. They're requesting terms of surrender." A hush fell over the war room. Keith allowed himself a small grim smile. "And so it begins. Prepare for the next phase of the operation. We move in to secure key strategic points while their leadership is in disarray." He turned back to the holo display, watching as more and more Orthodox strongholds blinked from red to neutral grey. The Galath cluster was falling, not to brute force, but to the weight of its own twisted ideology. "The truth will set them free," Keith murmured, more to himself than to his comrades, "even if it breaks them in the process." The celebratory atmosphere aboard the Transcendent Dawn shattered as Keith's enhanced senses prickled with an otherworldly disturbance. His eyes narrowed, focusing on something beyond the visible spectrum. The jubilant voices of his crew faded into the background as he attuned himself to the cosmic murmur rippling through the fabric of reality. The ancient Truth Warden hobbled to his side, her wizened face creasing with concern. "Yes, Truth Warden, a discordance in the higher manifolds. It's unsettling." Keith's fingers danced across the ship's neural interface, bringing up holographic displays of the surrounding star systems. Tiny fractures appeared in the projection, spreading like a web of cracks across a pane of glass. "All celebrations are suspended," Keith announced, his voice carrying across the bridge. "We have a situation." Toron stomped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the holograms. "What manner of threat is this, Keith? Another orthodox ploy?" Keith shook his head, his eyes never leaving the displays. "No, this is something else, something far worse." Without warning, Keith initiated a series of rapid transphasic hyperleaps. The transcendent dawn shuddered as it tore through the fabric of space-time, hurtling towards the heart of Leidos Prime. The crew braced themselves against the violent lurches, their faces etched with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. As they emerged from the final jump, the view screens filled with a sight that sent ice through Keith's veins. The sacred Akath Kiri core of their homeworld pulsed with sickly energies, waves of anti-reality radiating outward in nauseating ripples. Keith's hands flew across the controls, initiating deep scans of the phenomenon. Data flooded the screens, each new reading more alarming than the last. He peeled away layer after layer of distortion, probing deeper into the heart of the anomaly. And then he heard it, a voice vast and terrible, echoing not through his ears but through the very core of his being. "Listen close, mortal interloper." The words hammered into Keith's consciousness, each syllable a blow against the foundations of reality itself. He staggered, gripping the command console for support as the full weight of their predicament crashed down upon him. But Keith could barely hear him. His entire being was focused on the cosmic abomination unfolding before them, the Zentric Verglum Thror. He watched in horror as the anti-essence devoured truth and substance, gnawing its way through the very fabric of existence. With a supreme effort of will, Keith tore his attention away from the cosmic horror. He turned to his crew, his face ashen, but his eyes burning with fierce perseverance. "We've made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but there's still a chance to make it right." Keith's hands flew across the controls, initiating the overload transcendence rite. Alarms blared as the ship's systems were pushed far beyond their designed limits. Energy crackled across the hull, arcing between control stations in blinding flashes. "What are you doing?" Mira cried out, her ancient face contorted with fear and awe. "The only thing we can," Keith replied, his voice strained with effort. "We fight." As the final preparations were made, Keith addressed his crew one last time. "I don't know if we'll survive this, but I do know that if we don't act now, everything we've fought for will be lost. Are you with me?" A chorus of affirmations rang out across the bridge. Keith nodded, a grim smile on his face. Then, with a final command, he unleashed the full power of their truth essence against the cosmic void. The ship bucked and heaved as unimaginable energies poured forth. Keith felt his very being stretched to its limits, his consciousness expanding to encompass the totality of their daring plan. Through the maelstrom of cosmic forces, he directed their combined will like a lance of pure existence, driving it deep into the heart of the Zentric Verglumthraw. For an eternal instant, existence itself hung in the balance. Then, with a reality-shattering burst of energy, the meta-laser struck home. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.